You are listening to Footy Talk, where you get your latest news, interviews and analysis from the world of AFL. And it is a Tuesday, so I'm joined by my great mate, Nick Riewoldt. G'day, Rooey. Still plenty happening in the footy circles. We're getting close to the end, just 5 weeks until finals. Are we any clearer? Have you got more of an idea of what's happening, or are you now looking at it every Monday over there thinking, I've got less of an idea what's going to happen, especially with the Swans, it's a bit vulnerable?
Yeah, clear as mud. Clear as mud, Joe. I think last year we were pretty clear that the Swans were the absolute standouts, and it might have ended up being the most predictable finish that you could possibly imagine to a season when they won it. But all of a sudden, one of the things you can't control in footy is injuries, and they've been dealt a pretty rough hand. So we'll get into that and whether that will impact. But gee, the results on the weekend, they were absolutely perfect for the compression of that ladder. So, the Western Bulldogs and, some of those teams right on the fringe did what they needed to do. Teams at the top stumbled. It's just shaping up as a nail-biting final 5 weeks of the season, which is perfect. Yeah,
it certainly is. And we'll get into a few of those teams in a minute. But as always, on a Tuesday, we just like to start with our own thought of the week. And after the weekend's action, have you got somewhere you want to head it? Take it?
Yeah, it's concussion related, Joey, and I watch with interest the AFL coming out and announcing that they're going to issue 3 please explains to clubs for, I guess, perceived violations, or at least asking the question around the process where players are assessed in-game for concussion. And really I think it's a pretty obvious one, and I would be absolutely staggered if the AFL didn't go this way in the postseason. But to expect clubs to be managing, and club doctors especially, to be managing all of the things that they're managing in-game, and then layer on top of that the expectation for them to be absolutely across every possible head knock within games, I think is an unrealistic expectation. So if the AFL are serious about it, which they say they are, they need to take it fully in-house now and deal with it themselves. So, we currently have independent AFL people controlling it from the sideline and also from the arc. All they're then doing is is passing that on to the club doctors to review the footage. Now, club doctors are dealing with a lot on game day, and in a lot of situations, they're not even going to know about it because they're going to be downstairs dealing with a hamstring injury or stitching someone up that might have, cut something open. So I think it's time for the AFL to take control of it fully, have unaffiliated neurotrauma specialists on the sideline, watching the broadcast, in the arc, whatever it needs to be. And as soon as they see something between them that needs to be evaluated, get to the 4th umpire at the next stoppage, take control. No grey. It's black and white. They're off the ground, and then they get into the process because you're putting too much pressure on the club doctors. I think it is then open to manipulation, or at least the perception of manipulation, which is what occurred with Port Adelaide last year. And in some cases, the doctors aren't seeing it, or they're completely occupied and can't deal with it. So I think the AFL need to take control of it.
So it's a good point because, and that is where I think the conversations are heading with the players, particularly talking about Harry Mackay. Jordan Dawson was an example, and they're saying even now Harris Andrews staying out on the field after clearly getting head knocks. My simple view is, why do we not just treat it exactly like the blood rule? So an umpire will see a player have a scratch on the back of his arm and will stop play to make sure the player goes off and gets a tiny little bit of blood that's irrelevant, that's not going to affect anything. We stop the play, force him to leave the ground. But yet, at the moment, we've got a player that's clearly dazed or had some sort of head knock, and we just let him move out the way and continue to play on. I don't think that's a big change. And to your point, if the on-ground umpires miss that incident, you've got a 4th umpire on the boundary who can say, into one of the umpires' ears. There's umpires upstairs that can talk to umpires on the field, and there will be someone in the arc as well that can all clearly say to an umpire on field, hey, just for a minute, stop play. Harry Mackay, and the half forward, is still dazed from an incident. Stop play. He needs to be removed from the field. And I think none of us would have a problem with that situation because we're so accepting of it for blood on your knee. Like, I think you're right. It's something that can be done. I'm not sure why the AFL are still saying it's up to the clubs to do, because you're right. It is leaving it for, not deliberate violation, but keeping players out there late in games and not being able to see things and all those things you touched on. So the Carlton example was spot on. They had shown on the vision Dr. I think Rob Vorich, a former St Kilda doctor, had gone down into the rooms with Blake Acres only like 30 seconds before Harry Mackay got knocked. So when they said, Harry Mackay's days, well, the number one doctor was down in the rooms for a couple of minutes. So you're right, someone else needed to step in.
Well, the AFL in that situation,
Yes.
have an expert there on the sideline, have an expert up in the booth, have an expert watching the broadcast,
Well, they do.
have an expert in the arc.
Laura Kane has said
That's right.
There's a doctor at every game that sits behind the bench. Yeah.
But they need to have the imprimatur to make that call. You can't expect club doctors with all they're doing and all they're dealing with on game day, and you can't expect the umpires to be the ones dealing with it either. It needs to be a specialised person, again, only if we are serious about this, which the AFL say they are, and you know they've demonstrated they are with all of the rule changes. So I think this is the logical next step.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Hey, my thought of the week, we'll go on a bit of a lighter tangent with this one. Just watching the Hawks, big talking point. They are flying 9 of 11. They're doing it their own way. And these young upstarts just playing with confidence and swagger. And David King called them the Showtime Hawks, like the Showtime Lakers back in the 80s. My thought of the week is, how would you have gone as skipper if we had a bunch of young kids celebrating and acting the way the Hawks are? Because I don't know if you would have been able to handle it. But it's just
it's a loaded question, Joey. You know exactly how I would have handled it, and that's not well. I would have said, pull your heads in, act like you've won a game of footy before, act like you've been here before. But you know what? In the current day, you would absolutely be in the minority. And I love Jack Ginnivan's interview. I mean, to be honest, it kind of flew in the face of the way I perceive Craig McRae, which is a guy that would sort of let his players be themselves, and we trust you to go to Bali, we trust you to be yourself and do all of that sort of stuff. But the way the way Jack Ginnivan articulated it, I think it was with Cam Mooney, was, they just encouraged me to be myself, and that's why I'm playing such good footy. And you could say the same for all of those other young Hawks players that were acting the way they were acting, which was fun. It was Showtime. Kingy's on the money with that. I thought it was great to watch. Interesting, that's almost kind of the antithesis of what Sam Mitchell was as a player.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's able to recognise that and, we assume let those guys behave that way and express themselves and be themselves, I would have struggled with it. But it's good to watch.
Hey, it rubs off too. I had Noah in the backyard, Rooey, and he kicked the goal, and then he goes, "Dad, take a photo." And he was doing like the pose like Jack Ginnivan and GF, and they all get right into it. But it is fascinating. But then on a serious note, right? You just said, the Hawks let Jack Ginnivan be him. But we're not saying though that if the Hawks make the grand final this year, that they're going to say to Jack Ginnivan, if you want to go to the races, that's okay. Are we sort of still? It's almost like you're allowed to be yourself, but there's still got to be some boundaries there.
I think there's.
Because that's what Collingwood got really
standards.
frustrated with.
Yeah. Which I can understand. I mean, seriously, going to the races the night before the granny. I wish I was wired that way, Joey. I really do. I wish I had a little bit of, of that sort of attitude. But absolutely. I mean, there's some minimum standards that you've got to hit. I think it's a bit more about the expressing on game day, and it's working for them. I mean, it's infectious. You can see the way even some of the players that might have been a little bit straighter in previous years are embracing it. And if you're a Hawthorn supporter, you've just got to be so enamoured by the way they're going about it. And it just must be fun to go to the footy and watch these young guys do their thing. Yeah,
just ride the wave, just like Collingwood did for a long time. Yeah. Ride the wave and enjoy it, because it does end and you never know how long it will last. So go for it.
It does end. It does. And then the smiles disappear pretty quick.
Yeah,
all of a sudden you turn into serious heads again.
Yeah, and that will happen at some stage. Speaking of just riding the wave and whether it just ends, let's talk about the Sydney Swans, because all of a sudden, and no one's jumping at shadows, no one's riding them off or anything like that, but from where they were when they were 12-1, they had no injuries except for Mills and Parker to come back into the team. They had the top three players in the competition, you could say, at one stage with what they were doing. But now all of a sudden, so we know about the injuries. So Dane Rampe, they're saying, is calf tightness, but at his age, 34 years of age, sort of second or third issue with calf tightness. Don't expect him to play for a couple of weeks. Papley won't be back till finals, is now what they're saying. Callum Mills pulled up sore after his return. Will Hayward's got an ankle. And McInerney, who's an important player, with a PCL injury as well, still a few weeks away. Are you slightly thinking there was an element earlier that it was too good to be true for a bit there with Sydney? Like they were playing so well, had no injuries, that at some point it was going to get rocky, and now this is their challenge. And maybe where some other teams it was happening at the start of the year, like the Brisbane Lions or a few teams, now it's coming for Sydney sort of at the wrong time, the back end of the year. Is that more of an issue, or is it just a little hurdle they just have to get over and they should still be fine once the whips are cracking in September?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's terminal because well, at least from what has been reported, and can the AFL update their injury list on the website too? Side note, so you can follow that a little more closely. It's not terminal, and from what you read, there's no one that they're not going to get back. Now, Papley might be first week of finals. He's, I think, the most important out of all of those guys that are under some sort of cloud. But this is why it's important, or at least it's valuable, to bank wins.
Yeah,
because
right.
They're in a position now where they're not scrambling for top four. They're not scrambling for a top two and a home final. They've secured that, and so they can be on the side of caution and doing things a little bit more on their terms, as opposed to some teams that are fighting tooth and nail to actually lock away one of those spots that make a path to a premiership easier. So, you say it's coming at the wrong time. We're still, 5 weeks out from the first week of finals. We've got the bye there as well. So I think it's a hiccup. It's an opportunity to get some exposure to some other guys that you might need to call on throughout September as well. So I'm sure John Longmire will be, very glass half full about the situation and what it means for the Swans.
It's a good point. It's well said, because when you think about some other teams, I mean, Max Gawn was almost going to rush back to play over in Fremantle, and then he kicked the footy on his right leg and said that it was no good. So, guys like that, even Alex Pearce, maybe did they rush him back for Fremantle because they are trying to finish top four, and now he's fractured his arm, and we're not sure how long he's going to miss. Tom De Koning is a big one for Carlton, the punctured lung and a broken foot, not likely to be back until finals as well. I think he's been sensational. They are lucky where they're in a position where they do have a very good second ruck in Mark Pitnet, who can take the number one mantle. And then we're still seeing some players, Sam Taylor hasn't returned from his ruptured testicle, but he needs to get back, and Steve Coniglio and Josh Kelly. So the Giants are a team that are scrambling a bit more. So, it is fascinating that the injuries and what that can do to some teams. But hopefully, if everyone's fit and healthy, that's why the bye maybe for the finals is a good thing. I prefer it grand final week, but the bye for pre-finals allows all these teams to get most of their players, if they can, scheduled to be fit and available on that period of time. Hey, just last one before we go to a break. Just want to get your thoughts on the Western Bulldogs, and I suppose a little bit from your experience in regards to Rory Lobb and turning him into all of a sudden an elite intercept defender. His last 3 weeks playing back there has looked well and truly at home. I know you and Justin Kosicki both started in defence before you moved forward. Just how it plays out as a natural forward to play behind the ball, and is it something that every club should really be exploring if their forwards are a bit out of form, or is it a bit more niche than that?
I think it's a needs basis. I think the need for the Dogs was twofold, really. It was the need to find that support behind the football, because that has been an area for a number of years, where they've been slaughtered every time it's gone in. Well, I say slaughtered, but that's been a big deficiency in their game. They get outmarked and outbodied when the ball goes in their defensive 50. And they also needed to fix the Rory Lobb situation, and because they have made a big investment in him, so they needed to make it work. Yep. They needed to find a spot for him. Otherwise, it was going to be an absolute disaster if they had to get rid of him at the end of the year after the investment they'd made. So, win-win. And really, I mean, in terms of the dynamic on the field and how that plays out, it is a lot easier to read the game when you're behind the ball, because for a start, the forward's going to take you to it if he knows where he's going and what he's doing. If he doesn't, and you've got a bit of nous, well, then you can kind of position accordingly and just position yourself a kick away from the ball. You can't do that as a forward as easily, and you've got someone sort of right up your clacker trying to negate you all day. And if you don't have sort of great acceleration, great forward craft, it is tough to make that work at times. So, behind the ball is a much easier gig, and he's done it really well because he has those attributes. He can high point the ball, he reads it pretty well in the air, and he's strong overhead.
And they've won 4 of their last 5, the Doggies, and they might just be the team. We know Bevo likes to just build the team late in the season and just set them for a short little runway towards finals. He's got them to 2 grand finals and, of course, that flag. So just let's keep an eye out on the Dogs. I don't think they're lacking much now with the forward mix, the defence, and we know about the midfield. Hey, we will take a break because we want to get into some real talk, shit talk. Of course, if you are listening to Footy Talk and you are listening on Spotify, make sure you hit the bell and be notified when we drop a new episode. You are listening to Footy Talk. If you are listening on Spotify, hit the bell and check us out on Instagram. As always, bit of version of Real Talk, Shit Talk. Rooey, we'll get into a few of the talking points in the last 48 hours and just get our take. The first one, bit of whispers around Ken Hinkley being on the top of the West Coast Eagles coaching list. That is a good idea for West Coast to target Ken Hinkley. Real or shit talk?
Real talk, because the list is getting smaller, Joey. So we know Josh Carr and Dean Cox have both ruled it out. You would imagine they would have been pretty high up the list as well. You're not going to prize a Chris Scott or an Alistair Clarkson or a John Longmire out of their club. So I think you look at where there's up in the air situations or uncertainty, and I think there is a little bit of uncertainty around Ken Hinkley and what that looks like, and he's a proven coach. I don't think the issue with Ken Hinkley and Port Adelaide, or at least the question marks have been around can he coach. I think it's been more about whether it's time for that group to have a different voice. And so he can still coach. The criticism is just around whether it's right for that group after all that time he's spent there. So absolutely, if you're West Coast, I think you could do a lot worse than make an approach to Ken Hinkley, assuming that he's not at Port Adelaide next year. That is real talk. He's a beauty, Ken. Joey, one for you. Port Adelaide, they should, or at least here's another Kenny one, they should consider rubbing him out internally for a week just to straighten him up on the run home to finals, because Zachy Butters, because he's very, very close to the edge.
No, that is shit talk, Rooey. You don't suspend him for 1 week. You just sit him down, send him to some anger management classes, and if he keeps getting fined in the process, that's just hurting his hip pocket. It's I don't think it's hurting anyone else. I mean, he's still got some work on his leadership. We've had this chat before on this show. I would rather have a teammate like Zach Butters than have someone that you have to put a rocket up their ass to get them to perform week in, week out. I think he's an absolute beauty. Yes, he's close to the line, but as I said, rather teammates like that. He's got to have some conversations with some people off the field and work out what he wants to do. But no, I think that I'd rather have that problem, and I would not be suspending their best player for a week. It's just going to cost him a bit more money.
It was just a question, too, for all those people that are going to be, Nick thinks you're important. Like, that's how this segment works. Yes. We just G each other up. Joey asked me, hey, you should ask me this question because I've got a good answer for it. So I agree with you on that one, Joey.
Don't get so sensitive, Rooey. That was a bad question by you. Last one, the Bombers. They are struggling under the weight of expectation. That has been the talk the last 48 hours. It's more mental than anything. Do you agree with that statement or not? Is that real talk or shit talk?
I'm going to say it's real talk until I see otherwise, because I think in the high leverage, high stress moments, you look for the leaders and you look for the actions and their ability to deal with the highest pressure situations. So that is the pressure of expectation as well. And late in that game against Adelaide, there were incident after incident after incident where they weren't set up properly. They didn't dive on grenades, for an expression like you would want to see in those really, really desperate moments. And you look at that last Rochelle goal, there were numerous opportunities for the Bombers to have shown better leadership, have set up in a much better structure behind the footy, to have gone harder back with the flight, to have smothered with more assertiveness and aggression, and they didn't. So until you start to see that desperation in those desperate moments, then the question mark is going to remain. Now, they haven't been in a lot of these moments lately, and that can come with time. But for the moment, it looks like they're struggling a little bit with it. Last one for you, Joey. A lot of focus on Dusty and what he's going to do this week, next week, the end of the season, and with respects to his career. But has he earned the right, Dustin Martin, for all he's done at that football club, what he delivered them? Has he earned the right to sort of go through this process of decision making his way? And if that includes going back to New Zealand, he's earned that right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think that you got to understand how difficult a decision it is to finish up your football career. And for him to be making those decisions and thinking about what he wants to do right now, for a player that has lived and breathed footy, loves it. And that has been, that football club to him means everything. And if he's making this decision, and my gut feel he's probably leaning towards retiring, and this might be it for him, that is such a difficult thing to go through. So he's already injured at the moment as well, which happened at the back end of my career. I didn't play the last 6 or 7 games of my career. I was injured. It is mentally a real challenge to almost face that this could be the end. So if he needed to go home for a few days, how is that any different to, I know that, Liam Baker and Shea Bolton went back to Perth for a few days, and players do things on their bye. He was unavailable to play anyway. I think it's been extremely harsh. He is absolutely entitled to that right, and we don't know the internal conversations he's having with the football club and with himself about his future. I think that this is a period where we need to almost lay off him, because if this is the end, then I think it's a massive occasion for the football club. I think that it's big, and we just need to give him that time to come out whenever that is and say what he's doing, because I think those conversations are probably already happening internally. And we don't have to know right now. He's been a private person. The club can respect the way that he wants it to end, same as the way the Buddy Franklin situation ended. It was all about, well, Buddy's got the right to do it his way, whether you agree or not. And I think for me, Dustin Martin has the right to do it however he wants, because he's earned that right. Not many players do. And I think it is a very challenging period for him, and we should all respect it and more celebrate what he has done if this is it. And all the talk is that it won't be at Richmond anymore, and I don't think he'll go to another club. I've always been strong saying he will never go play for another club. So for me, that means it's probably looking like being the end. And if that is the case, it is a big loss to AFL.
Yep, well said, Joey. He's been a beauty. Some players want a victory lap, some players don't. Some players just want to do it quietly, and that's entirely their prerogative. And it is on brand with the way he's done it all the way through. Exactly. So, the ability to talk to family and to canvass a lot of the other stakeholders involved, because it's not just the players that ride this journey.
And what life's going to look like after footy, all those sorts of things. Before you are definitive, you need to have a clear understanding of what your life is going to look like, because it is pretty scary, Rooey, on the other side, and we've found that out firsthand. But
very scary.
Yes, but Dusty, he will
very scary. It
he
sucks.
Will be fine. He will be fine. Hey, that is it for another episode of Footy Talk. Make sure you check us out on Instagram. And tomorrow, Abby Holmes will be with Jack Heverin and the Zaharakis. Until then, enjoy your Tuesday. Thanks for watching Footy Talk with myself and Rooey. New podcast episodes dropping every Tuesday, so make sure you tune in.